So we're looking back through the looking glass, and I suddenly feel like I did the right thing getting this Kansas City Scouts hat, and thankfully somebody sent me this California Seals jersey. I think it's Oakland Seals, technically. I don't think this California Golden Seals at this point. So we look back to 1975 earlier. Now we're going to look back to 1976. NHL coaching heads still rolling. It's on page 2. But there's an interesting article on page 3 I want to get into. Yeah. Ken Schenkel got fired. There's Bobby Orr. And you'll see Bobby Hull in here too. Chances of the Blackhawks obtaining Bobby Orr have increased significantly in recent days. So significantly that associates of the Boston Bruins superstar no longer laugh when you broach the subject. They wink. 2 weeks ago, I would have said the likelihood of Bobby Orr being in Chicago next year was remote, said was the revelation from Alan Eagleson, Orr's Toronto barrister, at exactly 6:30 p.m., January 10th. Now I would say that the chances are at least fair. Who knows what it'll be like 2 weeks from now. There are two basic reasons why the possibility of Orr's departure to Chicago has graduated from a long shot to not so long. A loophole in his contract which might allow another team to sign him without sending any players to Boston as compensation, and his apparent disenchantment with the Bruins' new owners. The first area is a gray one, clouded lately by the erosion of the Roselle rule. The National Hockey League has with its Players Association a 5-year contract which includes a compensation protection clause. For example, Team A loses player to Team B, then Team B must return to Team A a body of equal warmth. Should the entire concept of compensation be declared illegal, then the NHL Pact could perish too, even though it was born through collective bargaining. But, even if it is upheld, Orr could be a free man, unencumbered by the specter of compensation come June 1st. He signed his last Bruin contract in 1970, and technically is not bound by the new NHLPA agreement, though he may choose to abide by it in spirit. What that means, said one NHL general manager, is that if Orr wants to be a hard-nose, he could conceivably just pack his bags and say goodbye in June, just like players on the 1970 contracts did when they jumped into the WHA. Bobby Hull won in court on the same basis. Orr could be just as free, even if he wasn't jumping. Enter Bill Wirtz, president of the Blackhawks, perhaps the NHL's richest club. He could offer Orr a healthy contract while not worrying about costly compensation or any compensation at all. Wirtz, being an honorable man interested in league welfare and being a prime mover of the NHLPA Peace Pact, probably would not select that route. It would create bad vibes and a bad precedent. But if Wirtz really wants Orr, and who wouldn't, such a lever certainly would not hurt his negotiations in a trade for the 27-year-old prodigy. Orr was only 27. Let that sink in. It would allow Wirtz the enviable bargaining position of telling the Bruins to take Joe Dokes in exchange for Orr, because if you don't, we'll sign Orr anyway and you'll get nothing. All of this is so much speculation, of course, because Orr wants dearly to remain in Boston, but apparently he is not enamored with the Jacobs brothers, who recently purchased the Bruins. No, Jeremy Jacobs, the very well-liked owner. They seemed vigorously interested in signing the superstar when he was healthy, but since Orr's last knee surgery in November, suddenly desire waned. The Jacobs, who are friendly with the Wirtz family, recently welcomed Bill's advice on a possible Orr contract, but still he remains unsigned. Perhaps they would like to watch him resume skating before they rekindle negotiations. But what if Orr balks at returning until he gets a contract? Certainly a man of his eminence might be hurt by such cavalier treatment. Anyway, should such a stalemate develop, Wirtz could join the picture in full tilt. He and Orr have traded so many bouquets lately that we can assume one of two things. Either they plan to begin a florist shop, or they plan to begin an era. Both of them were written as play to begin a florist shop. They still didn't edit back then. Bobby said that if he couldn't get it together with the Bruins, he'd love to be with us, said Wirtz. That's quite a compliment coming from the world's greatest hockey player. He's a fantastic person, a fantastic competitor. How's that not tampering? Did they not have tampering rules back then? Holy crap. Why? Did you see him the other night in Boston when the Bruins were playing the Russians? A fan started booing Ken Hodge a few rows behind where Bobby was sitting, and he wanted to fight him. But as for our chances of getting him, well, he's still in Boston, and that's probably where he'll be for the rest of his life. I can't talk about another player when he's under contract to another club. He just did. He just did. There's no way he'd get away with that now. Wink or no wink. And it says I, and then it's continued on page 27. So just bear with me while I find page 27. I have to be really careful with these, right? It's an old newspaper. I know that even on one leg, he'd still be the best. I know another thing. If he's available, there'll be a line of people wanting him. Yes, but the Blackhawks probably will be first. That's it. That's the whole article. Okay, all right. So and Bobby Orr did join the Blackhawks pretty soon after that. The fight between him and Jacobs, he should have retired a Bruin, and yet they were kind of right about their fear. Their fear of what would happen kind of turned out to be true. Okay, and because I did this with the other one as well. Number one scorer for the Atlanta Flames, Tom Lysiak. Boston Bruins number one scorer, Greg Shepard. Lysiak had 43 points in 48 games. Shepard, 50 points in 44. And Bobby Orr had 18 points in 10 games at that point. So the same, yeah, he hadn't played very much. Gilbert Perreault, 55 points in 44 games. Wayne Merrick, 37 points in 40 games, was the leading scorer for the California Seals. Chicago had Ivan Boldarev with 35 points in 42 games. Detroit Red Wings, Walt McKechnie, 49 points in 45 games. Guy Chiron had 45 points in 44 games for the Kansas City Scouts. So you see, that's why I wore the... See, you got it? Yeah. LA Kings, Marcel Dion, 56 points in 47 games. Dennis Hextall, number one scorer for the Minnesota North Stars with 35 points in 43 games. Guy Lafleur, number one scorer for Montreal, never heard of him, 66 points in 45 games. Brian Trottier, number one scorer for the Islanders, 52 points in 42 games. For the Rangers, Phil Esposito, 45 points in 38 games. Bobby Clark's number one for the Flyers was 71 points in 44 games. That's insane. Pierre LaRouche leads the Penguins with 58 points in 42 games. Gary Unger leads the Blues with 51 points in 43 games. And Darryl Sittler of the Leafs leads the way with 50 points in 44 games. The Canucks are led by Dennis Vervegert with 44 points in 43 games. And finally, the Washington Capitals led by Nelson Pyatt with 34 points in 46 games. Little known fact, the Las Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup that year. All right. Leaf Sittler makes scoring history. The funny thing about the scoring record for him is that he got it against a goalie who really probably shouldn't have been in there. Don Cherry probably shouldn't have put him in there. More individual records and milestones were attained in the February 7th game at Toronto between the Bruins and the Maple Leafs than any other game in National Hockey League history. National Hockey League history. Leafs devastatingly stopped Bruins' 7-game winning streak with an 11-4 victory. What normally would have been a tribute to Boston veteran winger John Busick was reduced to passing mention because Leafs center Darryl Sittler went on a scoring rampage unequaled in the 13,528 regular season games played in the NHL since it was formed in 1917. While Busick was moving past Del Vecchio of Detroit into second place on the all-time list of career point scorers. Think about that for a second. Johnny Busick was number 2 on the point scoring list. Well, look where he is now. He's nowhere near second. Sittler was setting a record for most points by a player in a game and tying 2 other marks. The Leafs captain tied the modern era mark of 6 goals in a game and had 4 assists for a credible 10 points. In the second period, Sittler scored 3 goals and added 2 assists, 5 points, tying the most points in a period. The fact that Busick's achievement perhaps did not receive the immediate prominence it deserved is not too surprising when one investigates the career of the 40-year-old native of Edmonton, Alberta. He's quietly moved into the second place, the all-time points list with 523 goals, 6th highest in NHL history, 760 assists, 4th highest, and 1,283 points. Yet, in 20 seasons prior to this one, Busick was named to only one first NHL All-Star team, 1970-71, and one second All-Star team, 67-68. Even when people started listing the players who have scored 50 or more goals in a season, Busic's name's often forgotten. He scored 51 in 1970-71. When this season started and some observers noticed Busic was nearing Delvecchio's runner-up career point total, his accomplishments were belittled by them because he's playing in the post-expansion era. See, there's a reason I go through these. But 573 of his points were earned in the pre-expansion days, and 431 of those points were gained when Boston failed to make the playoffs for 8 straight seasons. The fact remains that only one other player in the 59-year history of the NHL has more points than Busic. He, of course, is Gordie Howe, who in 25 seasons with Detroit scored 786 goals, 1,023 assists, and 1,809 points in 1,687 games. At this point, Gordie Howe's playing in the WHA, hasn't come back and played that one last season with Hartford. Some other achievements by Busic: 15 20 or more goal seasons, and at least 24 goals in each of his last 9 campaigns. 50 or more points in 17 seasons, including the last 9. 6 30-goal seasons, 2 40-goal seasons, and 1 51-goal season. 113 penalty minutes in the last 11 seasons. 11 seasons, 113 penalty minutes. That's Lady Byng. Yeah, he's had the Lady Byng trophy twice, 70-71 and 73-74. In 73 playoff games in the last 8 seasons, he scored 36 goals, 45 assists for 81 points. The other milestone attained in the Toronto-Boston game was the 350th regular season goal by Bruins center Jean Rattel, making him the 18th player in NHL history to reach that plateau. Sittler's 10 points broke by 2 the former record for one game. It was set by Maurice Richard of the Montreal Canadiens December 28, 1944, during a 9-1 victory over the Detroit Red Wings at Montreal. The Rocket scored 5 goals and 3 assists in that game, none of his 8 points coming on the power play. Rookie Harry Lumley was the Detroit goaltender. The mark was then equaled by Canadian left winger Bert Olmsted January 9, 1954, at Montreal as Canadians whipped Chicago and goaltender Al Rollins 12-1. I assume he's not related to Henry Rollins. Olmsted scored 4 goals and 4 assists, including 3 power play goals and 1 assist on the power play. Since Richard set the 8-point mark, there has been 9,453 games, including the one Saturday in which Sittler broke the record. In all those games, only Olmsted had equaled the Richard mark, and 8 other players had reached as many as 7 points in a game. Sittler is only the 8th player to score 6 goals in a game, and the only one. Joe Malone recorded 7, the all-time NHL record. And yeah, that's a total that stands up today. So these papers are a month apart. And then this one's going to be interesting. This is the last one. This is the thing to resistance. Because I saw this article, I'm like, oh man, I got to talk about this. Calgary owner says WHA here to stay. Bond fired by Toros. There seems to be a conflict of opinion what course the World Hockey Association is going to take for next season, but at least one person is adamant the WHA won't fold. He's Jim Patterson, head of the company which controls Calgary Cowboys of WHA. Now, Jim Patterson founded Save on Foods, Overweighty Foods. So if you go to Save on Foods, Price Mart, or Overweighty stores, Cooper's, that's who was the owner. It's kind of weird. I didn't know this either. This is news to me as much as this to you guys. I just saw the name on the article. I'm like, I've got to read this one. Patterson says WHA is here to stay and warns that league directors should be extremely careful in examining the stability of persons attempting to buy their way into the WHA. And right here, they've also got the Avco Cup is on that page. That's the championship they were playing for. They might as well just put right at the top of it, this doesn't look like the Stanley Cup. It only looks like the Stanley Cup. One of the reasons is that there is a large number of responsible, stable owners in this league, said Patterson, and others that fan support is growing in many of the most important cities. You don't hear about financial difficulties in Houston or Cincinnati or Indianapolis or Calgary or Winnipeg or Quebec. And New England is selling tickets to maximum capacity in its arena in Hartford. Let that sink in. You don't hear about difficulties in Houston, for fans who say that Houston won't support a franchise, or Cincinnati, a city that we've all forgotten could support a franchise, Indianapolis, Calgary, Winnipeg, or Quebec, and Hartford. And so we'll just let that linger. Patterson said WHA attendance figures have increased from 2.5 million its first year to 4.1 million in its third year, and there's been another 5% increase this season. While Patterson was sounding the clarion for WHA, one of the Loop's top stars, Bobby Orr, recently said after 4 years of lingering back and forth, he's getting impatient at the lack of action in merging the National Hockey League and the WHA. Hall says a merger is needed now for the good of the game. The best thing that could happen to hockey right now is for everybody to sit down at the same table and say what is good and what is bad for hockey, and look at the teams hurting the game on the ice and get on with it. The two leagues have to get together, if for no other reason than the people most important to the game, the fans. Hull said of the players' associations have to get rid of the people who are in the game just for a quick buck. Isn't that neat? That's really neat. That to me qualifies as really, really interesting. And you look at the score sheets in here. San Diego beats Houston 5-1. Phoenix beats Minnesota 5-2. Phoenix beats Edmonton 4-2. Winnipeg and Edmonton tied at 4. Quebec beats San Diego 5-2. Minnesota beats Toronto 6-3. Houston beats New England 4-3. Cleveland beat Calgary 4-0. It's just so weird. The WHA standings, Winnipeg was first with 84 points in 53 games. Quebec's up next with 78. Calgary 59. Edmonton 46. And Toronto Toros with 35 and 56 games. Don't tell me Toronto can't support two franchises. Eastern Division, New England led the way with 57 points in 60 games. So they're below 500, and they're leading their division. Cincinnati, 55 points in 59. Cleveland, 55 points. Indianapolis, 48 points. Western Division, Houston led the way with 74 points, 58 games. Then Minnesota was 64. Phoenix was 64. San Diego was 62, brings up the rear. So the weird part of this is the lowest ranked team in the Western Division is better than the first ranked team in the Eastern Division. It's interesting. All right. So let me know what you guys think. And again, I do this because it's fun. Having these magazines looking back is fun. And looking at some of the stuff that was happening then and comparing it to now. A 27-year-old Bobby Orr. He's too young to retire. He was 2 years away from retiring. Best player in the game, 2 years away from retiring. WHA can't fold. 3 years later, it did. And some of those franchises that weren't in any trouble, they've got great attendance, did not make the transition to the NHL. And in between, Darryl Sittler gets a 10-point game. And we hear about that 10-point game all the time. And in the same game, Jean Rattel, it doesn't matter. Johnny Busick, it doesn't matter. It's weird, isn't it? So there you go. And it's funny because Busick becomes the runner-up for points behind Gordie Howe, and now he's nowhere near second. And the argument being, well, Johnny Busick's points aren't as important because they're after expansion. Where have we heard that before? Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And hey, thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.